Hello, everybody. I am super excited for today's conversation with Dan, co founder of Pilot Project Brewing. First off, I think you're really going to appreciate and learn from his insights and unique business model. But also, I'm pumped because we're going to be hosting one of our CBP Connect Chicago receptions at their Logan Square location. So I hope today not only provides you with a little inspiration, but also some motivation to join us in Chicago this June 15th through 17th. And you can learn more at cbpconnects.com. But first, let's meet Dan. So, Dan, you're in Chicago. How is everything up there this winter?
Woohoo, hello. I'm not in Chicago right now, though it's been blissfully cold. Today and it's actually really warm out. I'm in New York City. It's been fun. One of our brands in our portfolio is called Years. It's a non-alcoholic beer brand that we launched with John Mulaney. And funny enough, we were able to do the Today Show this morning with Jenna Bush.
So you were
Jenna
actually
Bush,
on the Today Show, and I'm like your number two appearance of the day.
yeah, this is my second
I don't know
television
how I
appearance
should feel
today.
about that. That's amazing.
It was wild, and like his wife Olivia was there. It was so fun. I've not been on many like news sets, and it's crazy, but it was a blast. John did a great job.
So were you actually on camera as well, supporting, or either more supporting?
No, if you watch and listen carefully, he asks me a question at one point, like mid broadcast, and I answer. So my voice made its national debut today.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into that. But first, I want to talk about, how this business came to be, Dan. Talk to me a little bit more about how Pilot Project even came together.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was not born in the beverage industry. In fact, I was born more so in the music industry. I played music growing up. I loved the guitar, but I played every instrument, sang, did all that stuff. And I went to school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And when I graduated with a marketing and economics degree. But much to my parents' chagrin, and as cliche, I've lived a life of so many cliches. But I moved to LA to pursue a career playing music. And one of the analogies I use often to reference Pilot Project is how it's kind of like a recording studio and record label, but for the beverage industry. Because when you think about my move out to LA, I was met with, if I wanted to record an album, I didn't build my own studio, right? I went to one. If I wanted to syndicate my record to radio stations, I didn't go around knocking on doors all around the world or country. I worked with a record label. And if I wanted to book a tour, I worked with an agent. So you think about that as a creative artist, if you which is generous on my part. But if you think about that aspect, then you look at the beverage industry. We have all these creative entrepreneurs, creative brewers, cocktail mixologists, all of these people who have brilliant ideas, but then we're kind of expecting them to be like a CEO and a lawyer and all of these different things all at once when they're just trying to, create an innovation and grow a business. So Pilot Project, the impetus was really just inspired by the music industry, my experience as a performer, but then eventually on the business side too.
So what was the name of the band you went out to LA with thinking you were going to just blow up?
So it's funny is I always played in bands growing up, but when you're playing music and you have mouths to feed, I ended up having to just revert to being a singer-songwriter. So I went as a fake name when I was there, which I will not repeat right now. But it was because if you're getting paid $100 to play at a coffee shop, which even $100, you're lucky if you're making that much. I couldn't share that with a drummer, a bassist, and 3 backup singers.
So needless to say, you left LA, moved back to the Midwest, and launched Pilot Project. And I know on your website, you describe it, you literally have on the website, WTF is a beverage incubator. So for everyone out there, WTF is a beverage incubator.
Yeah. So when you think about it, again, I'll probably make music references all throughout this conversation. But when you think about it, Pilot Project, the way that we're set up is we have physical facilities to produce products. So we have a small kind of like brew pub style location in Logan Square, Chicago. Then we have a really, really big production facility in Milwaukee, like 70,000 square foot, capable of national production levels. And the concept of this incubator is, let's produce really small batches, right? Which we can do in our Chicago spot. We then launch it, and the first place we launch it is in our tasting rooms. So we have 3 of those, one in Logan Square, one in Wrigleyville, Chicago, and then one in Milwaukee. And then we have all of these distribution relationships that allow us to then validate concepts quickly, you know, in the likes of Whole Foods and other local spots like that. But then we have relationships with distributors across the country. Like I'm in New York today. We also met with our distributor. And we can syndicate our brands nationwide. So WTF is an incubator. The concept really is like we can launch, validate, and scale a beverage brand, one, like coherently, efficiently, and then in kind of like a near frictionless way to where scale is no longer scary. You think about how hard it is for baby brands that have no money to scale, or you even think about like major brands, Suntory Global, Constellation, and how hard it is for them to take an idea, a concept, and actually like intelligently scale it in a way that's not cost prohibitive. We kind of help fill that gap.
So it's so interesting. Like, but at what moment did you realize the traditional brewing industry model wasn't for everyone?
I mean, again, it's so much from my background so after I played music, I quickly learned that I wasn't going to make money playing music. So I pivoted. I went to the business side. I took a job as a music marketer at a talent agency in LA. And then I pivoted that role into, when I was 24, I became the editor of the homepage of YouTube. So if you think back, like almost 15 years ago, the YouTube homepage wasn't algorithmically driven by your preferences. It was hand curated by a person, and that was me. Every morning I would wake up and I'd like go pick out videos of dogs on skateboards and put them on the website. Anyway, I took that, parlayed that job into a different job, more specifically within the music realm at YouTube. Eventually became the CMO. That had moved me to Manhattan. In fact, my office was like 3 blocks that way. And then I took the role of CMO at a company in Chicago called Reverb, which is like, it's like eBay for musicians, essentially. Anyway, so I'd been in all of these businesses that were focused on decentralization. We're focused on giving power to creatives. And when we moved to Chicago, my wife and I, she was pregnant with our daughter, Lennon, and I couldn't play guitar inside the house anymore. That was my hobby. And so I picked up the hobby of homebrewing, very cliche number 2 for this call. I picked up the hobby of homebrewing, but unlike the cliche of all my friends and family likes my beer, which they were probably just lying to my face, but I did more research into the industry. And I learned, gosh, like it's capital intensive. You don't just have to know like state regulation within your state, but if you're going to then begin distributing outside of your state, which is how you build a viable business, or one of the ways you can build a viable business, you have to know the regulations and laws in the other states. And then there's accounting and everything else that comes with building a brewery, building a business and beverage, not just brewery. And I just saw all of those pieces and kind of felt like this is impossible. Who can like actually do this? Who can walk in off the street and say, I'm going to launch a brewery and do it in a smart, economical way? And so rather than, hey, my co-founder Jordan came into the picture, and talking with Jordan saying like, hey, rather than just like going and launching a brewery because we like beer, let's actually launch a system that helps make this easier for others, which was, really tied to my background in music and all of the resources made available to musicians.
So your background was in the music world. What industries did Jordan come from, and what did he bring to the table for Pilot Project?
Jordan has the most hilarious master's degree that you could ever imagine. His degree is in archives and records management, which is like
exactly what you want when you're starting a brewery.
100%. Like, I mean, he's an absolute savant, and basically like a librarian and museum curator all at once. So he also had no experience in the beer industry. We knew right away that we had to hire experts, and that was vital. We have a killer leadership team. We have a killer team, period, but a killer leadership team at Pilot Project. But the thing that he and I had in common that allowed us to kind of enter the industry while novices, ignorant to much, was just that like we both lived in great cities where the food, beverage, culinary scenes ran rampant, influential, and all that stuff. And we understood the language, the cultural language of the food and beverage scenes in so many different places. Like for me, I was in Chicago, I was in LA, New York, San Francisco, Madison, Wisconsin for school, and Minneapolis is where I grew up. And so that was kind of like the little piece that gave us confidence. But then we hired an incredible, head brewer. His name's Glenn Allen. He's formerly with Goose Island, Lagunitas, and Revolution out of Chicago, and just a great team all around.
No, that's amazing. So you've got this incubator model going. What surprised you most about it since you've been doing this?
I would say there's a surprise hidden around every corner, right? Just because it's like business is business. But when we launched it, it's not like we didn't really know that there was a need. It's not like I could go out there and crowdsource market data supporting how many aspiring beverage entrepreneurs there were in the world. And so I do remember when we were talking about, we launched in August of 2019. Jordan and I made the plunge in January of 2018, and we were going to do this. And I remember us talking about it. Obviously this is like the craft beer heyday, 2017, 2018, 2019. And I remember us talking about well, hey, if the demand isn't ultimately there, our fallback is that this can be a craft brewery. We'll have some fun, and that'll be it. But there was a PR story that leaked, I want to say March-ish of 2019, because somehow the architectural plans for the building got put up with the city or something. Anyway, there was a story that leaked about the business and ultimately the business model that sort of spawned a pretty decent amount of interest. So when we launched in August of 2019, we already had 5 brands signed up to be a part of this incubator.
So the brands saw the leak. They're like, I got to get a hold of this Dan guy. It sounds like a great idea. That's how it played out. I mean, Talk to me more about how they just connected with you and we like this, we want to do it. And the incubator is exactly what we need right now.
So, I mean, again, in the early days, it was very organic. I think people, it's like, hey, a friend of a friend wants to do this. I heard you're doing this. Is that interesting? There was legitimately a brand that saw an article in one of the local, trades, in Chicago. And so people were just proactively reaching out in those early days. We then did, and this was always part of the plan, but then we did set up a structure through our website for people to actually start applying, as you would apply for college. We have the same type of process online, and we got that on pretty quickly. But anyway, we're asking about the why with respect to the incubator, and we saw immediately that there was a need for it. So that was kind of surprise number one, was that wow, our hypothesis was true. And then I think we're, especially back then, but still very relevant now, is that we get pitched ideas from every corner of the industry. It's not just beer, it's not just one thing. And so whenever we launch a new brand that's in a space that we're not 100% comfortable, I mean, it's just learn all day, every day. And then you think about the distinction between how the TTB sees spirits opposite wine, opposite non-alcoholic products, opposite beer and FMBs and so on and so forth. So
I imagine you never get bored because you're operating in so many different elements of the beverage space.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a boring job. It's constant learning every single day. It's constant mistakes. I mean, part of our business model is obviously supporting, launching, and scaling businesses, but it's also discover the pitfalls so that others don't have to.
So
which is an expensive part of the business.
Well, hopefully you learn something new every day. You're going to get incrementally better at it and save money and be more efficient, I imagine.
100%.
So looking at your website, I could go complete the survey right now if I have a new brand or beverage that I want to bring to Pilot Project. So let's pretend I'm interested in making my brand the next big thing. What is that process like to get involved? What's the screening? How lengthy is it? What's that like?
So to date, we've launched 23 brands. We've got another 3 or 4 coming up in the new year, or now that it's the new year. We've launched 23 brands. We've had over 1,500 brands apply.
Wow.
And that's one of the cooler things. There was a concentration that happened during the pandemic, of course, but like that interest level has not weaned since the pandemic happened. But anyway, you apply online, and from that application, there's just enough information for us to see, like, oh, is this an interesting opportunity? Pilot project, we don't want to just churn out the same thing over and over again. So we're looking for diversity. We're looking for innovation. We're looking for, the right kind of crazy idea. And if we see that, then you're going to get outreach from one of our team members to get on a call, not terribly different than you and I are right now. And we're going to talk through your vision. We're going to talk through what you want to do. We're going to make sure that you are the right kind of crazy.
Do you want the people reaching out, like where in their journey do you like to find them? Where it's just an idea, maybe they're already producing, like what sort of business sense do you typically see?
I mean, most of them are day zero. Most of them are like sure, if it's beer, maybe they're a home brewer, or maybe they're a brewer, a different brewery. But if it's an RTD or it's this or that, like maybe you've done some bench trials at home on your countertop, but the expectation is not that you have a fully vetted product. Like, come to us with enough information so that we can see that your idea is good, that you have a brand vision, that you have a trustworthy entrepreneurial spirit and mindset. If you come to us with those things, like, we can kind of fill in the gaps. Like, we have absolutely had brands come to us and with a concept that we then greenlit, and they had never actually made the product. So we had to make the product with them. And then there was no sense for whether or not the product would actually even taste good. I'm not going to tell you what brand it is, but if you look at our portfolio, I bet you can figure it out.
Does it taste good?
It tastes great.
Love it.
It's in 40 states now in the country.
Oh my gosh.
So it did really well. And so anyway, you've gone through that process. You've got on the call with one of our team members. We then invite you out for like a formal audition. Basically, it's like, think Shark Tank and American Idol in one. And you come, you pitch to a broader team, mostly internal, but a couple other external folks, like think distributors and restaurateurs and stuff like that. And if we like what we hear, then we offer you essentially like a bid to become an incubated brand with Pilot.
And you've had, I think you said, well over 1,000 brands apply, 23 you've brought on. How many brands do you bring face to face for the pitch stage?
I think out of those 23, this is not going to be an exact number, but it's probably in the 75 to 100 level. So once you get to that point, that's a pretty high likelihood. We don't have a set number that we're willing to take on versus not. It's just kind of, it's risky for us to launch these new brands. Our reputation is at stake. So we want to make sure that if we're going to launch you, we want to make sure that this thing can win.
So you've worked with a lot of unique brands. I mean, obviously the traditional brewery brands like beer, but you've also worked with kombucha, non-alcoholic, pickle beer, and more. Like, what do these choices say about where the drinker's audience is going?
So what is really fun about our application process is not only do we get to see a bunch of diverse ideas coming from diverse people, we also get to see trends. Like, we launched our first ready-to-drink cocktail brand a couple of years ago, and the reason why we launched our first RTD brand is not because like I went out there looking for one. It's because all of a sudden, it's crazy to look at the timeline. Like back in 2019. 90% of our pitches were beer brands. Go figure. And then 2020 hits, 90% of our pitches are hard seltzer brands. And then, enter the ready to drink cocktail and THC and functional and non-alcoholic. It's like there's an ebb and flow always to what those pitches are. But so then very naturally, when you lower the barrier to entry in any industry, you start to see a clearer vision of like what the world looks like. And then you also just inherently get to see lots of fun, interesting, fresh ideas. And so that's kind of how all of those options came to be. And then you look at it from our perspective, we're a portfolio business. Like we don't want to have 10 of the same thing. So when we see a new, fresh idea from a trustworthy entrepreneur or someone that we think is motivated to kind of take it, to that level, it's that much more enticing.
No, that is amazing. So from the pilot project perspective, what are the trends we should be watching right now? Or is this top secret because you're banking on this one brand to be the next big one?
No, it is wild. I mean, it's wild to see some of the thing. Like right now, of course, non-alcoholic products are rampant. That's popular. We've launched 2 already. One of those brands was already acquired. We are about to launch a 3rd non-alcoholic brand this year. Not in the beer category, though, a different category. So that one's really popular. Functional in general. We always see a lot of beer, even though like everyone is talking trash about the beer industry right now. Like we still see a ton of beer ideas come through because there's always a freshness to the concept of locality, right? And there's always a shift in like ideals. Maybe we're not prioritizing hazy IPAs the way we were 5 years ago, but there's still a really, really nice trend tied to local and experimental and fresh with the beer scene. So right now, non-alc is popular. Spirit-based RTDs is still very popular. I'm starting to see people, instead of it being like a generic ready-to-drink cocktail, I'm starting to see people pitching more like nuanced concepts, like an Amaro, vermouth, or a bitters-based like stuff like that. So I like that we're branching out a little bit. It's kind of like we went for the 5 mainstream drinks, and now all of a sudden people are getting and recognizing that, hey, there's a market for different types of Aperol spritzes and so on and so forth.
So one thing I'm curious about, these brands reach out to you, they sign on with Pilot Project, some sort of partnership, I imagine. What does creative control look like? Who's driving the train? How are you all working together? What is communication like between you and all the partners that you have?
That's a good question. When you think about it for a brand coming in, so most of the brands have, on the low end, one person associated, and then generally very rarely more than like 4 or 5. They all of a sudden get our entire team as a resource. And so Pilot Project is 185 employees now. Wow. Across three different physical locations, but then we have team members across the country. And so you think about that, like all of a sudden you get indoctrined into this group, like basically this company that has support across every facet of the industry, right? Like if we want to become a craft beverage network that is stronger than any other, I don't know what you call it, like innovation engine out there, we need to have experts in every single department. So you join us, and all of a sudden you have, you work with our director of sales, who comes from, he was a big wig at Lagunitas. You have access, and then his entire team supporting him. And then you get access to our head brewer, and he has 5 other people on staff that also had the title head brewer at other locations, and that incredible team. And you get access to our compliance team, and I mean, there's it's kind of like boundless with respect to what a small to medium sized company would expect with their staff.
So I want to focus now on some of the brands that you work with. Completely by chance, I told you before the call, I connected with Richard at Funkytown, who I'm excited to spend time with also when I'm in Chicago. But, they're a brand that had some exciting news recently, and I'll shout it out right now because I believe it's public. They just received quite a bit of money to finally build out their tap room, which is amazing. So talk to me about some of the brands you've worked with and how they've evolved and grown.
So when people come in, like none of them have to have the same aspirations. We obviously we don't want to expend our resources if there's not a thoughtful future for whatever the brand is coming in. But realistically, success can be completely different. So in the early days, one of the first brands that we launched was a hard kombucha brand called Luna Bay. And I loved them coming in. What was so fun is like they were very aspirational with respect to, they wanted to be the king of off premise nationwide. This is when like June Shine was coming up through the ranks too. So there are very few players in the market, and they absolutely wanted to scale nationally as quickly as possible. And they did a great job of it. But as a hard kombucha brand, they weren't trying to go out there and build, a tasting room and all of those things like the Funkytown team is. Whereas you have a brand like Donna's Pickle Beer, and right now Donna's Pickle Beer is one SKU. It's crazy. They were just featured on the television show I Love LA. If anyone has watched that, it is unbeknownst to us, they did not tell us that they were going to have the product on the television show, but they got like a pretty legitimate call out. Anyway, with a pickle beer brand, same thing. They didn't necessarily want to build a tasting room, but they don't want to just have one SKU, but it's not like they're necessarily going to have their second SKU be a beer. It could be a completely different product, because when you have an engine like Pilot Project now, we're also trying to blur the lines between all of the different disciplines within, the bev or adult beverage space. So they could make a non-alcoholic pickle beer. They could make a michelada. They could make a Bloody Mary mix. Honestly, they could make a Donna's pickle chip for, all I care, but they're thinking about brand extension very differently than Luna Bay or Funkytown was. So I think like that's for the most part, the approach that we see, or the differences that we see, is really just like product makeup. But then you do have brands coming in saying, I want to launch the first dedicated cocktail brand and tasting room, which is Devious, the brand called Devious and Pilot Project. Or you have a local brewery to Chicago that launched through us, focused solely on like, I want to win the Chicago suburbs. And that doesn't, to some that might not seem like this big business play, but you know how many people live in Chicago, how many people are in the greater Chicagoland. It was a very aspirational. It was a big move. So I may have danced around the question there a little bit, but
no, I mean, you've highlighted some of
snapshot.
the brands you've had the opportunity to work with, and that's the fun of it. I mean, you get to talk with all these really cool founders, learn from them, make their products a reality. And, as you've grown your team, work with more brands, you've scaled. I mean, you started with a small team. Now you have multiple facilities. How has the way that you've been able to provide value for all these brands changed?
I mean, it's just more, right? In our early days, I still think that our secret sauce is our ability to validate a concept early. You think about how costly it can be to launch a brand without the resources of Pilot Project. I mean, a lot of people have experienced that. And so in the early days, our model still made just as much sense as it does today, saying, okay, well, let's create this thing. Let's launch it in the tasting rooms and make sure that people like it. And then, back then it was, let's just scale it to the different trusted retailers we have in the Chicagoland market. As we've evolved, it's just now that our influence has broadened. We have a seat at more tables than we used to, and we might have a little bit more authority when we're talking about, leveraging Pilot's relationships to get brands into, bigger box retailers or arenas or anything like that. But then the piece that I think it's not as glamorous, but it's great, is that because Pilot's business has grown and because the volume that we produce has increased, our collective bargaining is considerable now. And so all of these brands that are coming to us are entering the market with much hardier margins, but then they're also able to compete on price. Like today, sorry if I cleared my throat into the mic. today we were talking with John Mulaney, and we just went live in 5 states for the year's non-alcoholic product in Whole Foods, and we're priced at $9.89, which is 10 cents cheaper than Athletic. No other brand could launch and compete at that price point without the negotiation, the leverage that Pilot Project ultimately has, because yours might be getting some great national attraction or attention, but it's still a small brand.
So let's dive deeper into John Mulaney, because we've mentioned it twice now. You're in New York in the Today Show earlier today. How in the world did that partnership come to be?
It's a wild story. So again, for the most part, well, I guess you'll determine if it's wild, but so for the most part, most of the brands that we've launched have come in reactively through that portal.
Yeah, I just want to imagine John Mulaney late at night just in your contact form.
So the year's brand did not initially have John tied to it. It was the project was pitched by his name is it's actually a longtime friend of mine. His name is Pat Corcoran. He owns a wine brand called No Fine Print, and then he's also I met him in the music industry. He was Chance the Rapper's manager, the manager of a bunch of other artists, and a really great guy. And he had been sober for the last few years, and he comes to me and says, Dan, I really want to launch a brand. I want to launch a non-alcoholic brand. I have these different ideas. And this is that same kind of thing where, he had everything kind of figured out. We just needed to make sure that we would nail the product exactly as we wanted it. So we said, okay, let's do this. We're in. We're down to collaborate. We came up with like a proprietary process to create the product and then launched it. And at that same time that we launched it, John Mulaney was on David Chang's cooking show, talking about how he wanted to invest in Athletic as a sober person. He wanted to invest in Athletic, but Athletic actually turned John down because of the controversy, right? He was, he went to rehab and he's got an entire Netflix special about it. And so they legitimately turned his investment interest down. And so Pat and I are texting back and forth one day, and Pat just goes, wouldn't it be cool if we could somehow get this in front of John Mulaney? And this is where it's crazy is one of our connections from music just happened to be the music producer for John's Netflix show. We didn't know that, but that guy, his name's Kevin. Kevin reached out to Pat the next day saying, hey, Pat, can I get your feedback on a few things music related for what we're going to do on this new show I'm working on with John Mulaney? Pat responds like, of course, but can I send you some beer?
What?
Yes. And so he's like, can I send you some beer to share with John? Kevin goes, yeah, of course. Like, he's really interested. John's never been tied to another product before. He's wanting to kind of get into that side of the world. So we sent him, one of the first runs of Year's beer, the Pilsner, I think, and he loved it. He emailed us directly the next day, which is the funniest thing because
did you think it was a real email when John?
No, like legit. I thought it was like John Mulaney's tour, and
like your buddy just messing with you, like, hey, we got him,
or like a drip campaign or something like that because my phone was listening to me.
Yeah,
but no, sure enough, John Mulaney reaches out, says, hey guys, I tried the Years, I loved it. I love the branding. I want in. And not only did he want in, he wanted to be a co-owner.
Well, time out for a second. Like, he got the beer. Did he have any idea you were interested in being part of it, or you just wanted to get the beer in front of him?
We wanted to get the beer in front of him. We were hoping that like maybe he would, have it on his desk at the, on his talk show or something like that. And obviously we loved at that point the idea of partnering with him, but never truly understanding. And of course that's expensive. Never truly understanding like where it could go. And then sure enough, he's like, he didn't want money. He wanted ownership. He wanted to get in on it. And he was no stranger to the beverage industry. His wife, Olivia Munn, was one of the early investors in Poppy, which just exited for a healthy amount of money. And so he kind of wanted to have his hand in the space too. And this was it. And so he's an owner of Year's Beer with Pat Corcoran and Pilot Project.
That is fun. The places you never thought you would be. As you are in New York right now. So John Mulaney, I think, is an outlier to your business model in a way, and kind of how that's changed. So let's talk about those brands that reach out to you through that contact form. Like before they even decide, hey, you know what, I want to see if Pilot Project can help. What are the barriers you see new producers facing right now trying to even, get out there in the industry?
So what's crazy is that like my answer today is so different than what my answer would have been even just 2 years ago. Like right now, consumers are fickle, customers are fickle. Consumer preferences are changing faster than they ever have, and loyalty is like zero. And so one of the things that I think Pilot helps with right now, more than you probably would have realized years ago, is how much we de-risk the concept of launching something new. And you can take that in a dozen different ways, right? Like when we launched Donna's Pickle beer, we trialed 5 different products all at once in our tasting room just to see which one customers liked the most. And that's what we selected, right? So like that's one way of getting quick feedback. But then there are other ways of, hey, I've got this suspicion, like we have an Indian inspired brewery it's a gentleman. He was born in Mumbai. He had this like instinctual like hypothesis that said, every time I go to an Indian restaurant, I'm left buying Kingfisher as beer if I want beer, like and like Indian people want to see their culture represented in this industry. So his hypothesis is like, well, can we launch an Indian brewery and what does that mean for the Indian restaurant space? And sure enough, like we launched it and we were getting emails from restaurant owners all over the country. And then the piece that I love about what our model allows them to do as well is that they don't then, like, once you build the company, the brand's name is Azadi Brewing. Azadi means freedom. And but anyway, what they're ultimately trying to do is create a point of identity. They're not trying to be a quintessential brewery. So now if they want to launch an RTD product under the same banner, they can. If they want to launch a THC drink under the same banner, they can. And I think that's the piece where when I get back into like how fickle customers are, that is one of the flexibilities that Pilot as a model can help support now. But then, of course, there is the obvious stuff. Like it's really expensive to launch a production facility. So, use ours. It's state to state regulation is extremely confusing. Lawyers are expensive. Use ours. Or, hey, by the way, most of our contracts already, exist. You can just sort of tag on to them. And there's just a lot of those other benefits that are more like back office things that you learn by doing that we get to just support them with day one.
So one thing we've chatted about this conversation is like just constantly learning from other people, learning from our mistakes. Have there been any brands that you've interacted with, and you don't have to say any names, you can avoid this if you want, that you thought were going to be the next hot item, you were really behind, and it didn't quite work out?
100%. I think one of the things that people, I don't think there's ever like an idea that didn't pan out, just because by the time it gets to us and by the time that we like move forward with it, it's been beat up, right? Like we've considered every angle. We've thought about it. Why is this or is this not going to work? I think that the one example of where something may not have gone as you'd expect is just the fact of, again, consumer preferences. Hard kombucha had a heyday, right? And then it kind of tapered. And so our hard kombucha brands then pivoted into other directions with those. So like that's a very relevant and like, oh, okay, maybe not anymore. But I think the other difficulties that people see is just entrepreneurship. When you launch your own thing, it's like there's no one there to support you. There's no life raft, right? And so Pilot Project gets to be that, well, we hope to never be a crutch, but we get to be that support system. But it doesn't change the fact that you're talking with Rich. Rich knows this very well. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. Growing a business is really hard. And like, even with, I like to think of Pilot as an ace up a brand sleeve. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that we solve all of the problems. Like, you still have to, be the leader of your business. And I think that's a, when you lower that barrier to entry and you allow people to enter with less friction, it's a reality that kind of hits you a little bit faster than you might expect.
No, thanks for sharing that. So Dan, like, what have you learned about making access more equitable and sustainable for underrepresented founders?
I just think that, so I would love to stand on a soapbox and say I'm the greatest guy in the world and I did this for all of those reasons that you just outlined. I think like the better representation of like my honest truth is that these types of businesses, which I learned in my YouTube days, my Reverb days, and all that stuff, like these types of businesses that decentralize, that give power to creators, to smart creatives, and can exist in any industry. So you can build a really healthy business like Pilot Project, being a I don't know what you'd call that, like a centroid for cool ideas and concepts to spawn from.
Centroid is a great word.
Thanks. That's like pulling like my only sci-fi phrase out of my, but anyway, like our type of business can exist in a lot more industries, and it should. If we were allowing ourselves to build more things like Pilot Project across the entire spectrum of creative, innovative spaces, theoretically, you would see more diversity just naturally come to fruition. So, again, that's sort of my way of talking around the question, which is not to say I launched this and was like, well, I want to launch an Indian brewery and a Black-owned brewery and 9 businesses owned by women and this and that. Like, that's just what happens when you lower the barrier to entry. That's just what happens when you allow the world to participate in the concept.
I think that's amazing. And you've had those success stories. You've raised a bit of money. You have a 70,000 square foot production facility, and you opened a new tap room in Wrigleyville recently. You hinted at this model could be done to other things. Do you ever think about expanding outside of beverage to do what you just said? Or what are your goals moving forward?
I mean, I certainly want to continue growing Pilot's influence. So we are raising money again. Pilot is a healthy business, but this is a capital intensive industry. It's a capital intensive business. So we are raising money again to expand Pilot into more geographies, and just allow more efficiency to improve margins for both us and our brands. So that's happening right now. So, hopefully you're going to see a Pilot Project on the West Coast and the East Coast and all that stuff in the not too distant future. And then I want to continue expanding Pilot across the entire spectrum of beverage. I just think opportunistically, this need, like the Pilot's purpose, is needed everywhere. But then the thought of like launching in other industries, no, I will leave that to others. If anyone wants to do this in food or something else, contact me. I'm happy to share my playbook. But this is hard enough. I'm good where I'm at.
So I've loved learning about your business model, and I see the value for all the brands you've had the opportunity to work with, and just the experiences you had are so neat in this changing beverage industry right now. But, imagine someone's just walking around Chicago. They want to go somewhere for a drink, and they show up at Pilot Project. I mean, the taproom experience, the community you get, I love it so much. And so many people just love tap rooms as community centers. So I walk in there. How do you explain what you do just to your average person looking for a drink?
I mean, it is hard, right? Because we touch so many different sides of the industry, but to oversimplify everything, I just say it's a record label and recording studio for the beverage industry. And when I say that, it translates. But when you go in experientially, like the space doesn't look and feel like a brewery. It kind of feels like a living room that you just want to like hang out with your friends and
You were
enjoy
the
a few
second person to
drinks.
describe their tap room to me as a living room today.
Oh, so I'm not even unique. Darn it.
You're number two.
Okay.
Well, I was
either
number
way.
two earlier. You're number two now.
All that being said is like the idea is just for it to be a really fun, functional, malleable space. Like when the event is being hosted this year or this summer, you'll notice that all of the furniture is modular. All of the colors are like earth tones. Why? So that all of the brands that we're working with, when Donna's Pickle Beer wants to launch Donna's, 4th anniversary at Pilot, they can make it look and feel like Donna's. It's that type of like functional and fungibility that makes that experience unique. And then when you walk up to the bar, it's a full bar, right? So think about this as our focus group, right? This is not, we're not trying to create false positives in these spaces. So by offering a full bar in all 3 of our spots, you can walk in and order Manhattan, or you can order one of Pilot's branded drinks. And then we can kind of see and test and learn, like, where are your preferences ultimately sitting? And you think about having real-time customer data that doesn't exist in our industry. It's 3 tiers, and those 3 tiers don't include customers. It's producer, it's distributor, it's retailer. So the fact that we can provide that level of data granularity to our brands is something that no other, beverage business really has access to. Even Nielsen data is still just at the retailer level.
That is so cool. So most people in the space don't have the same business model as you do. And you've been successful, you've learned a lot, you've innovated. What can other breweries, say your average brewery, take from what Pilot Project has done to make their business more successful? Any tips you offer?
Oh gosh. So I'm going to say this without saying like all the cliche ones. I think the thing that I would go back to anyone on right now is like there's no longer this expectation as a beverage brand that you do any one thing one way. I do think the brands that are going to win going forward are the brands that are building integrity in their concept. They're building integrity and connection through their actual branding. And I think that's kind of bar number 1 in the industry now. You look back at the last 15, 20 years of, I'll say, and specifically in the brewing space, like brands launching, and maybe they named it something, like they named their company something goofy that meant something to them, or they named it after their dog or what have you. And the reality there is just that like there's that the connection that you need to have with your customers, with your fans, needs to be intrinsic, because then if you become a part of their story, they're going to tell your story again and again and again, right? And so sorry, this is like more like philosophizing or whatever that word is than you're probably expecting, but I think that's like where I go back to right now, is like how front and center brand needs to be, because then it allows you to pivot, it allows you to move, it allows you to not necessarily be tied up in just one corner of the industry. If you build a strong brand, you can play in any arena.
I mean, that's great advice right there. No, I think this is a great point to wind down. And I have one final question for you. Actually, I'm going to give you an option. I'm going to ask you 2, and you get to pick which one of the 2 you would like. The first question you can choose from is, tell us the name you went by when you were first out in LA, so we can look. That is option number 1, and we'll make the other one fun too. You mentioned you were the one in charge of like the front page on YouTube. How in the world did you choose which dog or cat video got the honors of being there that day?
I'll do that one because that one's more fun. So I would wake up. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I would wake up at 3 a.m. every day, Saturday and Sunday included. I would get on a 30-minute call with a London-based agency who had, over the last 24 hours, they'd been combing all of YouTube's like the videos that were basically popping off in any one corner of the world. And they would serve me like 100 options. And then from those 100 options, I would sometimes without even watching the video, which was, I made quite a few mistakes that way. But through those 100 options, I would go through and just select based off of the title, like clickbait kind of mentality, or like whatever the subject matter was. And you have to remember in the early days of YouTube, I'm not kidding about it's like cat videos and dogs on skateboards. Like that's what people love. They still love cat memes. And so like that stuff was, and this is the day of like the double rainbow video or chocolate rain or Charlie bit my finger. Those are all the way that they grew to popularity was because they were featured on the homepage of YouTube or they gained virality through some other form. So I did that every single day and it was wild. And then what was so fun about this is that once I pivoted, so eventually the homepage did become algorithmically driven, but YouTube still felt that human curation was kind of still relevant within the music space. And so I dove into that, built a different algorithm that would localize to specific artists in specific parts of the world. And I happened to see that there was this young artist in London who she was popping off with like a ton of velocity just in this little small part of the city. And I reached out to her, invited her to YouTube and to fly out to YouTube on our dime. She brought her mom. We like spent a week with her, filmed a bunch of content, put $5 million like fake dollars, like YouTube feature dollars behind her, and her name is Dua Lipa. And so like she blew up, and that was fun. And so I don't know, fun little.
So whether the YouTube world or the beer world, you have a good eye for finding people and ideas. You might not.
Either that,
you're pretty good at it.
So much of it is data, right? If you can discover the right kind of data, which is why I think our tasting rooms and that end user feedback loop is so important. Data tells the story, and then you just create the story on top of it. So, I mean, Pilot Project is very well looking for our next Dua Lipa within the beverage space, but with some of the brands that we've launched, they're on. I was Today's show today, and you just mentioned what Funkytown's doing. Donna's is off in the outer space. Like everyone's having a good time.
You're living a fun life, Dan. And I appreciate you taking a little time to hang out with me today. I mean, secondary to the Today Show, of course. But for anyone who's interested in learning more about Pilot Project, or maybe even submitting a form to pitch their brand to you, how can they do so?
Please visit our website, pilotprojectbrewing.com. Otherwise, follow us on Instagram. We are at Pilot Project Brewing and at Pilot Project MKE, specifically from our Milwaukee spot. And then don't ever hesitate to reach out to me directly. My email is dan@pilotprojectbrewing.com.
Well, Dan, this has been fabulous. I can't wait to share a pint with you when we come to visit in June. So thanks again for the time, and we'll see you soon. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this session, we'd love to see you in real life. We host in-person workshops across the country for craft beer professionals just like you that are held in some of the most exciting beer destinations around. These immersive events are designed to help you grow and connect with others. You'll meet peers from across the country and leave with actionable strategies for success. Connection has never been more important, and you can learn more at cbpconnects.com. Cheers. See you there.